Our first question is a long form opener question. And so please share with us your experiences and the roles in your personal life that connect to DC for Democracy's ideals of justice, equity, and a voice for all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Ms. Perry and DC for Democracy for putting this together. My name is Karim D. Marshall, and I am running to be your next at-large DC council member. The reason I'm running is really simple. I think we have a council who hasn't actually met its actual responsibility in being able to take care of being an effective oversight organ or being able to thoughtfully produce legislation that makes your lives better. Now, I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, a father, and a parent of a 2-year-old. One of the things that's on the horizon for us is trying to figure out where we're going to send our daughter when she turns 3. The fact that we have to go through a lottery, that we're relying solely on random chance to determine whether or not our children are able to get an adequately resourced education is horrifying to me. I understand that the thought was to try to make things fair, but all it's really done is force people who live where I live, east of the river, to try to figure out how to get their kids into a school that's on the other side of the city. That's not equity, that's not justice, that's not fairness. Now, as we move forward as a council, we have a responsibility, particularly as we face going into a difficult economic climate, to be making very smart, deliberative, and thoughtful decisions about how we spend your money to make lives better for the rest of our residents. I have 12 years of government experience. I know what the government does well and what it doesn't do well. And if you put me on the council, I'll make sure that the next 4 years are better than they were before. Thank you.
The district has extreme levels of income and wealth inequality, with the average white household having 81 times the wealth of the average Black household. Addressing this will require sustained and large-scale investments in housing, in education, job training, healthcare, and a host of other needs in communities that have been historically exploited. What do you see as the way forward to make these sustained large-scale investments?
It sounds like we're talking about both education and housing. And I think there's a couple of things that we need to say at the outset. Part of the challenge that we have as a government is that we've been too reactive over the last 20 years. We always knew that the plan in order to get our fiscal house back in order required DC to grow to about 700,000 residents. And now that we're there, we're looking at a situation with feigned surprise. Like, we didn't build enough houses for 700,000 people, and now we're in the middle of a blitz to try to close that gap as quickly as possible. And I'll give the executive credit for doing as much as they can with the resources that they have. But in order for this to really be fixed, we actually need to have a concerted effort from both the council and the executive to come up with a long-term economic development strategy. That's been absent. We haven't had that in the last 2 administrations, or the last two cycles. So I think what the first thing we can do is, in order to fix this, is to have a general economic strategy for the district as a whole that both the legislature and the executive have worked together and agreed on, and has also gotten the buy-in of the most affected communities, particularly those where I live east of the river. We talk about unemployment numbers and we talk about wealth gaps, but the true unemployment number, not just the number of people who are looking for jobs, but the true unemployment numbers, the gap between the working age folks and the folks who are employed east of the river, is more like 44% and 37% respectively. So if we want to be honest about fixing some of these problems, we have to be honest about the conversations that we're having. And that starts with getting our government to work together consistently.
Good evening. With the near constant media coverage of crime, understanding your vision for the future of public safety is essential. On one hand, the Police Reform Commission drafted numerous recommendations for decentering the police, including shifting responsibilities to and heavily investing in community-based resources, holding police officers accountable for misconduct, and decreasing the size of the force. On the other hand, Mayor Bowser recently requested to increase the size of the force, and the council approved funding for significant hiring bonuses for new recruits. What are your priorities for making DC safer? And specifically, what would you do to ensure that all residents, especially the most marginalized, feel safe? Thank you.
The first thing we have to acknowledge is that people are legitimately afraid. Now, the question is, do we give them answers that give them hope, or do we play into their fear in the hopes that they vote for us? I prefer to give you information and help you make decisions so that we can actually have a better future as opposed to just playing on your fears. So I'll say this: we have a lack of coordination problem. The fact that the council convened a police reform commission and then did not implement the recommendations of that commission, and then the mayor subsequently created her own commission, is an indicator of the fact that our government is not particularly well coordinated. We need people with lower egos who are willing to work together to try to serve all of our residents. Secondarily, we need to talk about the fact that in order to truly destroy crime, you have to destroy the parents of crime. You have to eliminate poverty. You have to eliminate depravity. You have to eliminate the fact that if somebody doesn't see a future for themselves, they're more willing to commit a crime. And then finally, the juvenile justice system is supposed to be rehabilitative. If we arrest a child, put him on a monitor, and then throw him back into the environment that led him to crime, he's more likely to commit another crime. We have to focus on rehabilitating as opposed to just putting people under monitoring.
Thank you, Mr. Everyone agrees that domestic workers should not be subject to human rights violations. Yet here in the district, domestic workers, including house cleaners, nannies, our home care workers, who all provide essential support in homes, are excluded from the district's human rights law. The Domestic Worker Employment Rights Amendment Act is a piece of legislation currently before the DC Council that would finally end this loophole. How have you supported this legislation? And what specific actions would you take to enact this needed reform?
So I think the important thing to remember about these types of these jobs and this discrimination associated with it is that it has its roots in Jim Crow. When you think about the lower work protection standards for domestic workers, for farm workers, for tip workers, this is all a result of the fact that after slavery was legally ended, the institutional structures were adjusted in ways to continue to oppress those types of employees because they were overwhelmingly Black employees. So we're dealing with the legacy of institutionalized racism when we talk about the disparate treatment between certain types of jobs. So the most important thing we have to do is be honest. I come from an equity background, and you have to lead with honesty. This is the history we're dealing with. So the most important thing I want to talk about with this is that part of the challenge that we have on the council right now is that we have a chairman that exercises disproportionate power because the members don't actually know the rules well enough to force a re-referral of a bill. So part of the job is being able to convince your council members, but part of it is also being able to know who you're dealing with and being able to work the rules in a way to make sure that your bills move forward.
The minimum wage here in the district is $16.10, but the minimum wage for our tipped workers is only $5.35. Initiative 82 will be on the ballot this November. And if it's passed, it'll increase the tipped minimum wage here in the district. If the measure passes, will you pledge to uphold the will of DC voters and allow it to become law? Thumbs up if you're a yes, thumbs down if you're a no, and please hold it in the middle of the screen. Mr. Hill, oh, there you are. Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much. Second question. Ranked choice voting ensures that candidates are elected to public office with the support of a majority of voters. Do you support ranked choice voting? Thumbs up if yes, thumbs down if no.
I actually disagree with the premise.
Mr. McDuffie, it's a yes or a no, and I see your thumb down.
Well,
Mr. Marshall, you're trying to do the middle of the road.
Conceptually, yes. Conceptually, yes. I have problems with the implementation we've done so far, but conceptually, yes.
All right. Thank you all. Third question. The Reclaim Rent Control platform would make much needed updates to the district's decade-old rent control law, but it's met procedural inertia. As a result, our rent control laws apply only to a handful of units, all of which are 30 years, all of which are 30 years old or more and remains still full of loopholes. If elected, would you be willing to co-introduce the Reclaim Rent Control platform? Thumbs up if yes, thumbs down if no. If elected, would you be willing to co-introduce the Reclaim Rent Control platform? Yes
Just
or no?
clarification, this is their entire platform?
The platform as it is.
Can I add
see a
stuff to
thumbs
it?
down from Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Marshall and Mr. McDuffie.
If I can
Yes or
add some
no?
I
things,
haven't even seen
I don't
the
think it
entire
goes far
platform.
enough.
I haven't seen the entire platform yet.
Yeah, I don't think it goes far enough, but sure, it's a good start.
We're going to keep moving. Thank you. Number 4, the Local Resident Voting Rights Act, which is currently before the DC Council. It would expand voting rights to local races, to permanent residents and green card holders. Do you support this bill? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thank you. Mr. Neosi. Okay. Mr. Neosi is a thumbs down. The rest of you, thumbs up. Thank you for that. Number 5, Councilmember Charles Allen's Metro for DC proposal would offer $100 each month in Metro fare to every DC resident who applies, and the funds for the program, it funds the program with future surplus revenues, so ahead of other possible surplus uses. We'd like to know whether you support the proposal, and then we want to know if you support its funding source. So 2 different questions here. So let's start first with, do you support Councilmember Allen's proposal? Thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. Thank you very much. Nope, I don't see anything from Ms. Silverman or Mr. McDuffie. Thank you, Ms. Silverman. Mr. McDuffie, where are you?
Vote for nuance. An opportunity to engage and collaborate.
Not a choice.
Okay.
Second part of the question, do you support the way it's funded? Again, with future surplus revenues. I see a thumbs down from everyone except for Ms. Silverman. Okay, thumbs down from Mr. McDuffie. Thank you all. Next question. In April, Councilmember Janice Lewis-George introduced the Green New Deal for housing. The bill would create an Office of Social Housing to oversee publicly owned mixed income housing that generates deeper affordability by reinvesting rent payments into lowering costs for tenants and creating more social housing. If elected, would you support this bill? Mr. Schwartzman, I see 2 thumbs up. We got you. Mr. Hill, Mr. Neosi down. No. Mr. McLaughlin, is that a yes? Ms. Silverman, that's a yes. Mr. McDuffie and Mr. Marshall, where are you?
I mean, we haven't even had a hearing, Kim. Come on.
Yeah, without being able to mark it up, it's so hard on these.
Yeah, some of these bills need serious work.
I'm sorry, this is not how I've legislated for 10 years. I mean, it's just not that simple. You're awesome, by the way, Kim. I love your way you moderate, but.
Thank you for that. Let's keep moving. All right, final lightning round here. Rapid rehousing is a short-term subsidy program meant to help individuals experiencing homelessness find affordable permanent housing. Right now, it does not work well here in the district. Many of our families who receive subsidies are unable to afford rent once the subsidies run out. Legislation in the DC Council would alter rapid rehousing so that families unable to afford market rents could transition to permanent housing subsidies. Do you support this? Thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. Mr. Hill is a yes, Mr. Marshall is a yes, Mr. Schwartzman is a yes, Mr. McLaughlin, yes, Ms. Silverman, yes, Mr. Neosi, yes, Mr. McDuffie, where are you?
I'm here.
Yes or no?
It's rapid rehousing. I mean, it is not that simple, Kim. Come on, guys. Let's give people something to really know what we're about here. It's not simple as just a no.
Do we all get to speak to?
Thanks.
No.
Thanks to you all for putting your thumbs up or your thumbs down. I appreciate it. All right. We've completed that part of the lightning round. Let's keep moving.
Good evening. My name is Sharice Muhammad. I'm a Ward 7 resident with a niece in DC Public Schools, Duke Ellington School of the Arts, my alma mater. My question is for each of the at-large council member candidates. A successful collective bargaining for our teachers of the Washington Teachers Union is critical at this time, where the vacancies in teaching positions, both full-time and substitute teachers, are on the rise. If elected, how would you advocate for our teachers? And what would support look like? Thank you.
So one of the advantages of putting me on the council is that I actually have experience in labor law practice. As a practicing attorney, I actually dealt with a lot of this stuff for DPW, so I'm very familiar with labor agreements. Now, I personally believe very strongly that I owe a lot of my success, nearly all of it, to the foundation that my parents gave and to the foundation that was provided by District of Columbia Public Schools. I love teachers. I have an irreconcilable debt with teachers. So I work strong to make sure that they actually have a contract done on time. But some of the things that we need to keep in mind is that teachers make all other jobs possible. First, we can talk about statutorily inserting cost of living adjustments into all of the contracts, because this isn't just the Washington Teachers Union. Theirs is the most egregious example of a contract going over time. But generally, the government as a whole is really bad about making sure that we renegotiate these contracts in a timely fashion. So if the council statutorily inserted cost of living adjustments into all contracts, that would at least deal with the pay issue. And then finally, we need to revisit these no strike clauses.
Urban Institute says that the district needs an additional 40,000 rental units with rents under $800 a month to meet the needs of DC residents. Please share your top 2 policy or budget priorities for addressing the district's affordable housing crisis, things that would have the most impact.
My positions on housing are actually really complicated, so I'm actually going to invite people to go to my website, marshallfordc.com. Go to the section that talks about housing, and there's a lot of information in there. As far as my practical experience, I worked for DMPED for 2 years and the Housing Authority for 6 months. So I understand the way the district in particular does development deals, more so than any of the sitting council members, and definitely better than any of the other candidates. But there's 2 things that we can do that are really quick, relatively fast, and relatively high impact. First thing is we can actually activate all of the vacant units that are in public housing. In addition to the vacant units in public housing, there are an additional, at least that we know of, at least 10,000 vacant houses in the District of Columbia that could be converted into homes that were available for purchase or sale or rent, depending on how the people who currently own those houses would like to be able to dispose of them. But we need to do some reforms to our probate and transfer laws in order to do that efficiently. And
From the district's landmark and nationally renowned Birth to 3 law to the recommendations of the Police Reform Commission, the district has some of the most visionary programs and policies in place that our leaders then fail to fully fund or implement. What do you think needs to change in order for our policies and programs like these to actually become reality?
So everyone, again, I invite you to visit my website, marshallfordc.com, and you can see some of the more thought through details on things I'd like to do. But I love this question because it lets me talk about what I did for 7 years in the district government. I wrote legislation and I wrote regulations. And I approach things a little bit differently than any of our sitting council members. They start with legislation. I say we have to start with coming to you, our employers, our bosses, and getting agreement on what the problem is. We talk to you to define the problem. After we define the problem, then we start talking with stakeholders and we work with the executive to come together on what the possible solution is. And then we come back to you. Does this solution actually work for you? And if we can get your buy-in, if we can convince you that the ideas we came up with are good ideas, then we start writing legislation. But we start with an understanding of what problem we're trying to solve, what the solution actually looks like, and how much it's going to cost, because we're spending your money. So what I can promise you is this: after all that's done, not only will I introduce solid legislation, but I'll make sure it's fully funded from introduction. And I'll also make sure that it's working because I'll conduct oversight. I'll come to the residents. I won't rely on 2 hearings every year to get a sense of whether or not the executive wants to tell me whether or not it's working. I'll come talk to you. I'll come to your communities, and we'll have an understanding about how this is actually impacting your life, as opposed to just relying on the filter of television politics.
Mr.